decoding the fundamentals of crypto, one block at a time. Welcome to Chain Insights, where we analyze and break down the core principles of exciting crypto projects using cutting-edge AI tools. Always remember that our content is for educational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice.
All right, so you're here, which means you're probably the kind of person who wants to stay ahead of the curve. Keep your finger on the pulse of the market,
Absolutely. And right now, there's one thing that's got everyone talking crypto ETFs.
specifically for altcoins.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just hype. This could seriously shake things up. So today we're cutting through the noise.
We're going deep on the landscape of pending altcoin ETF applications in the U.S.
Basically, what are the chances of approval and what could it mean for the market?
So first things first, we got to talk about the regulatory scene because it's been shifting.
Yeah, it's a major change in SEC leadership after the 2024 election. Trump's victory with his pro-crypto stance injected a lot of optimism into the market.
It's a big contrast from former SEC Chair Gary Gensler. He was known for his regulation by enforcement approach, basically labeling almost everything as an unregistered security and hitting the market with lawsuits.
Right, and the video really emphasizes this shift. When Gensler left office on Inauguration Day, it signaled a potential turning point. Acting Chair Mark Yu and nominee Paul Atkins both seem to be more pro-crypto. They're more about establishing clear regulations instead of just cracking down.
And it's not just talk. Since Gensler left, we've seen dismissed lawsuits, a green light for a yield-bearing stablecoin security, and the SEC even acknowledging that meme coins aren't securities.
Plus, they're actually engaging in conversations with crypto firms now.
Oh, and the revocation of SE 121, that's a big one.
Yeah, that lowers the barrier for banks to hold crypto, which could mean more institutional involvement down the road.
But here's the key takeaway. The SEC is now acknowledging spot ETF applications for a bunch of different altcoins.
Right, that's huge. A spot ETF, directly holds the underlying asset, the altcoin itself. It's not like a futures ETF.
So with that in mind, let's get into the specifics. Which altcoins are actually in the running for an ETF? It starts with XRP.
And there's a lot of interest in XRP. 7 different issuers. Bitwise, 21 shares, Canary Capital, Wisdom Tree, CoinShares, Grayscale, and Volatility Shares. That's a pretty impressive lineup.
Yeah, and there's this idea that XRP might be the first in line.
That's because of the regulatory clarity that came from Ripple's court victory against the SEC in July 2023.
It was a major win for Ripple,
It definitely set a precedent, but there's a catch. The SEC is still appealing the decision.
as of the recording of the video at least.
Right, so there's still some uncertainty there. But even with the appeal, Polymarket's prediction gives XRP a 75% chance of approval in 2025.
Oh, not bad.
No, not at all. And the SEC has already acknowledged filings from Grayscale and 21 shares with a final deadline estimated around mid-October 2025. So we should have an answer within the next year and a half.
Okay, so what about Solana?
So Solana had 5 initial applications: VanEck, 21 shares, Canary Capital, Bitwise, and Grayscale.
But there was a hiccup.
Yeah, but the SEC didn't acknowledge 4 of those applications back in December 2024.
Which conveniently coincided with the change in administration.
Right. According to Bloomberg ETF analyst James Seifert, that lack of acknowledgement was essentially a rejection.
Interesting.
But CBZOE BZX refiled on behalf of VanEck, 21 shares, Canary, and Bitwise soon after.
Shows you they're serious.
Definitely. And importantly, the SEC did acknowledge Grayscale's application to convert its Solana Trust into an ETF. Plus, Franklin Templeton threw their hat in the ring in February. So now we're up to 6 applicants.
So there's definitely growing interest from big players.
Yeah, and Polymarket's prediction for Solana is even higher than XRP, 86% chance of approval in 2025.
Wow, okay. But didn't James Seifert mention potential delays?
Yeah, he did bring up the possibility of it getting pushed to 2026 because of those ongoing lawsuits claiming that SOL is an unregistered security.
That's been an issue for other cryptocurrencies as well.
It has, but the good news is those lawsuits seem to be getting paused or dismissed.
Just so the path is clearing.
It seems so. And the estimated final deadline for most of the Solana ETF applications is also around mid-October. So again, lots of potential decisions coming up next year.
Okay, let's move on to Litecoin. It's been around for a while now.
Yeah, the 3 filers for Litecoin ETFs: Canary Capital, CoinShares, and Grayscale.
That seems low, especially considering Bloomberg analysts James Seifert and Eric Belchinas reportedly give it a 90% chance of approval in 2025.
Yeah, that's a pretty high level of confidence. But Polymarket's prediction is lower at 69%.
Maybe they think there's less investor demand compared to some of the newer altcoins.
That's a possibility, but there are reasons to be optimistic about Litecoin. For one, the SEC hasn't labeled it a security.
That's always a good sign.
It is. And as a fork of Bitcoin, sometimes called digital silver, it might be easier for regulators to understand. They might see it as more like a commodity.
Right, so the estimated final deadline for Litecoin is October 3rd. Now for the wild card, Dogecoin.
It's surprising how many applications there are for a Dogecoin ETF. Osprey funds, Rex shares, Bitwise Grayscale, even a potential leveraged ETF from Tidal Capital.
Because everyone's testing the waters, seeing how far this pro-crypto shift at the SEC will go.
It does seem that way. And remember, the SEC declared that meme coins aren't securities at the end of February.
I can only imagine what Gary Gensler thought of that.
Yeah. But anyway, the SEC has acknowledged Grayscale's Dogecoin ETF filing, which they did in February. The deadline is estimated around October 11th, but there's conflicting info from Bloomberg Intelligence suggesting a much earlier deadline of April 6th.
So that one's a bit up in the air.
It is.
Okay, so beyond these big ones, just a few other altcoins.
Right. Cardano has an application from Grayscale. They filed in February, and it was acknowledged pretty quickly. The deadline for a decision is around October 22nd.
What about Polkadot?
Both 21 Shares and Grayscale have filed for Polkadot ETFs. But as of the recording of the video, neither had been acknowledged by the SEC. If they do get acknowledged, the deadlines would probably be in late September or early October.
And then there's Aptos.
Bitwise filed for an Aptos ETF in early March, so the potential deadline would be early November.
And Hedera.
Canary and Grayscale both filed for Hedera ETFs in late February and early March. Looks like mid-October for a decision on those.
So the floodgates are open.
Seems so.
Multi-crypto ETFs. There are already some Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs out there.
The demand for those has been pretty low so far.
And there are applications pending for broader crypto index ETFs from Bitwise and CoinShares.
Yeah, Bitwise application is paused at the moment, and CoinShares is still waiting for acknowledgement. So it seems like the focus is really on those single asset altcoin ETFs for now.
Okay, so let's talk about what this all means for the market. ETF approvals would likely boost the prices of those specific altcoins.
Yeah, it would open them up to a much wider pool of investors, traditional investors and institutional investors who might be more comfortable investing through an ETF.
Makes sense. ETFs just make it more accessible and they seem more legitimate to some investors.
Exactly. We might see a wave of speculation with investors trying to guess which ETF will be approved next. That could drive up prices even before any official announcements.
But there's a flip side too, right?
Yeah, if the demand isn't really there, like what happened with some of the early Ethereum ETFs, the price impact might not be as positive.
Prices could even drop.
It's a real possibility. An all or nothing scenario. Either we see a huge influx of capital, or it shows that there's not enough institutional demand for these altcoins in an ETF format. It all comes down to investor appetite.
Okay, so to sum it up, the U.S. regulatory environment is looking more favorable towards crypto with new leadership at the SEC. This has led to a ton of spot ETF applications for various altcoins, XRP Solana Litecoin, even Dogecoin, and also Cardano, Polkadot Aptos, and Hedera.
Right, and while this could lead to big changes in the market, it all depends on how much demand there actually is for these new ETF products.
So for all of you listening trying to stay ahead of the game, here's something to consider. Which of these potential ETF catalysts do you think holds the most weight, and what does real lasting demand actually look like in such a volatile market? It'll be fascinating to see how this all plays out.
Absolutely. It's a dynamic situation that requires careful observation and critical thinking.
And that wraps up our deep dive for today.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.
If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more deep dives into crypto fundamentals, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow.